You're in for a treat today because today I'm going to show you the inside secrets of how to design and build incredible waterfalls. I've been designing and building waterfalls since 1993. I have a passion for water and I want to share with you the science, technology, engineering, art, and math on how you or anybody could actually dissect an actual riverine system. Understand the fluvial geomorphology that actually creates these amazing structures, and then how to implement all these incredible designs to create breathtaking waterfalls on any scale. All right, everybody, this is one of the videos that I've been waiting for. I have been designing and building water features now. This is gonna be my 33rd season. So I started back in 1993, which is really hard to believe, but the time actually has surprisingly gone pretty quickly. The reason I'm excited about this is I just wrapped up a massive project in Southern Africa. You guys maybe have seen some of that. Everything is operational, looks phenomenal, but what I wanna talk about is designing and building streams and waterfalls. How I've taken the past 33 years of all of my background in biology, my love for nature, my love for outdoors, the power of observation, going out into nature and checking and learning and just using biomimicry concepts actually to design and build water features. Imagining river systems without water inside of them so you could actually see the underground structures of how the rocks and the shoreline and the beaches and the logs and the aquatic plants and all that stuff interacts to create this beautiful symphony of water, plants, and animals, and all of that amazing life that we just love and we flock to the coast for. So today, I really want to kind of break down specifically, more specifically, is the actual act of designing and building waterfalls. It does have to start though with the medium that we're working with. Water, highly dynamic. It is a dipole. It means it has positive and negative charges onto it, and it is because of that it's known as the universal solvent. More things will dissolve in fresh water than any other thing, than any other compound on our planet. Inside of us, it does all types of biological processes, and then out in nature, we have all of that incredible stuff that we can see on a daily basis. Everything on our planet actually utilizes water in one way, shape, or form. One of the things that I think is very unique is actually just that. Water, there's no structure to it. You pour it in your hand and you can't even hold on to it. It's gonna pour right through your fingers. But if you get enough of it moving in the right direction at the right velocity, it will cut through solid rock. So just understanding these different principles is really powerful, and that's what makes designing and building water features highly dynamic. It's because we have to think about the water in motion. We have to think about how all this different stuff is going to interact, and then we have to try to replicate it. Now here we have Niagara Falls, one of the most powerful and magnificent waterfalls on the planet. But what I think is unique is a couple things. I always look at the type of rock that we're working with. So you can see here, this is more of a sedimentary type stone. It's got these really flat ledges going all the way across, and you can get these massive sheets of water coming off. So you have to understand that when you're designing and building. What type of rock are you going to work with? Is it going to be rounded boulders? Is it going to be more ledge rock? Is it going to be kind of jaggedy stone? Is it going to have all types of cracks and fissures and things that are going to allow water to go through little rivulets? Which actually brings up this picture, which is in Croatia, and I think it's just awesome. It's not a massive waterfall, beautiful little ribbons of water kind of coming out in different places and everything, and it just creates an incredible sight and sound. So what do you want to achieve? What's the goal for it? Do you want to have this big, huge, powerful fall, or do you want to have something that's kind of subtle and contemplative? And you also have to understand the distances that you're actually working with. Are you going to be directly next to it, or are you 100 feet away from it? Because you're going to want different types of water flows depending upon how far your viewing area is from. Commercial falls, completely different. When I'm working in a commercial location, you might be viewing it from hundreds of feet away, so you have to have a big mass of water similar to Niagara Falls in order to create the desired effects. Now I think this is kind of neat. If you followed me for any length of time, I like understanding root words. Fluvial geomorphology. I know it's a mouthful. The derivative here is flow, or fluor. Encompasses all things found within a river, within a flowing body of water. Then geomorphology. Geo actually means earth. Morph is form, and ology is the study of, is to study. So geomorphology is understanding these earth forms. So fluvial geomorphology, the earth forms that are shaped by flowing water. This is what actually creates
rivers and streams and waterfalls and cascades and all these different unique things. So fluvial geomorphology is actually that discipline that we want to really try to understand if we really want to become good in our craft. So here we have what fluvial geomorphology actually looks like, and you can see starting all the way up at the very top. And I love just the basics of science because you can't go wrong. I mean, this is the type of stuff that you could understand on a high level, or you could dig down super deep and understand all the little intricacies of each and every component and part. So we have our source of water up here on the top. Could be springs, could be snowmelt, could be rainwater, you name it. And then more and more water gets added to it as it continues going downstream. You have all these other little tributaries, so the volume of water gets higher and higher and higher. And the other thing that actually changes the speed of the water going down, the width of the channel. So as you go further down in a watershed, the stream's typically wider and wider and deeper because they need to account for all of that water volume. When you have a steep slope, the water just wants to go from point A to point B as quickly as possible. So it's just gonna bounce its way straight down a hillside. Then once it gets down into those plains areas, then it could actually start to carve and kind of meander and create all these unique shapes and forms of our river systems. Now, when we talk specifically about how waterfalls are formed, a little bit different. Waterfalls themselves are actually created when you have a slight variation in elevation. But what happens anytime you have just a subtle change is it creates a little bit of a plunge pool. And as you can see here, we have a harder layer of rock up here on the top, and then you have a softer layer. And then what happens, just with that velocity of water, it actually starts to scour stuff out. Natural rivers are highly dynamic. The water flow is going to change up and down according to the seasons. During heavy snowmelt, heavy rains, the water velocity increases. So even if you have just a minuscule little bump, right on the downstream side of that, the water is going to kind of come down at a higher angle. And what happens when that occurs, it actually creates a scouring motion. The other thing that actually happens during heavy rains is you may have other particles actually inside the water. You might have grains of sand. You could have bigger pieces of pebbles. Those are actually going to increase that scouring action, and it just cuts into the riverbed. And then if you have a harder layer like you have here, that's not gonna move because that's a harder type of stone. And then it scours out that lower stuff. And then what happens is you create these little bit of plunge pools. And what I love about this is it creates those overhanging ledges and pockets. I love to try to recreate these on a mini scale. We call that an echo chamber. So when you have these big giant boulders that are immovable and you have this little cavern behind it, when that water cascades over that little pocket, that water sound kind of gets bounced off the back of that little cavern, and then it projects itself out. So you could actually play around not just with the visual aspect of the waterfall, but also the auditory, which I think is really, really important, because a lot of our customers over time, they say one of their favorite things is not just the look, but it's the sound of the waterfall.
I mean, look how naturally this thing cascades. It looks like all these rocks were here for however long.
Exactly.
You know, thousands of years.
Just wow, I'm completely blown away by this. I knew you guys would do amazing work. It's beautiful, and the way the water moves through it and around it, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Oh my gosh!
My gosh.
So
Thank
beautiful.
you so much. You're welcome.
I'm firing my therapist. This is it. It looks so natural and so beautiful and peaceful, and it's truly better than I could have ever imagined.
I never
seriously.
If you've experienced it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It is magical, and it just puts your entire body at ease, which is exactly what we're trying to achieve whenever we're designing and building. We want to create a place of peace and serenity. I mentioned in the beginning, you have to understand the type of rock that you're actually working with. And that's because the water is going to react differently. So smooth rocks, when water flows over it, if you don't have a lot of flow going over something like this, because of the specific gravity of the water is going to stick to it. When that happens, it's not a bad thing, but it's just going to look like a wet rock. In order to make that water fly off of the surface, you have to do one of two things. You either need to have a really nice crisp edge, or you have to increase the water velocity. And here are a couple calculations I have. So to create that basic sheet of water, you need between 1,000 and 1,500 gallons of water per hour per foot. And then for boulder falls, we have to increase it because remember I just said this is a boulder fall. You have to have the water leave the surface of the stone. When that occurs, you get a little bit of an air gap in between. And then what happens to create that whitewater effect, that air becomes mixed into the water column with tiny little bubbles. And it's those bubbles actually that give you the visual of white water. And it's because of the way of the refraction of the light and etc. So you want a bunch of little bubbles inside of there. So a couple different ways of doing that. One is to choose a really flat rock. I don't even have any really flat rocks here. We'll say this one, that's fairly flat. If that water was going to go off of that crisp edge, it's just going to fall. And you don't need a lot of water to achieve that boulder falls, you need a little bit more. Now for commercial falls, completely different. I alluded to it just a couple minutes ago by saying commercial falls, you might be viewing them from 100 feet away. If that's the case, you need a lot of water velocity kind of going over those boulders to create that desired effect. So here are different types of rock. This is more of a sandstone-y type of a granite, these nice sharp edges on those things. That's just gonna kind of have that nice little veil of water going over it. And you can actually mix these different strategies. You could come in and you could change them up. It doesn't all have to be perfect. And that's actually what I love about designing and building, is I'm not stuck to one thing specifically. By having a series of nice wide shallow ledges of water going over, it's going to create a different sound than all of that same amount of water going through a narrow gap where you have really thick heavy water. So both of those are going to have different sounds, treble tones and bass tones, and when you mix those together, really sounds incredible. Here is one of those boulder falls I was talking about. To get that water flow, that whitewater effect, I take that same volume of water and by having a thicker amount. So there's two ways to do that. So one of them is I could stick with that 1 foot number I said, or I can cut it in half. I can go 4 inches or 6 inches, which is exactly what we did here. So now you're taking all that water. So instead of way out here, you choke it down and have the water get thicker and thicker and thicker as it cascades and it bounces through all these little narrow gaps and gorges. The Clearary Project, Southern California, beautiful, beautiful hillside that we had to work with. We created something very peaceful for her and her family out there, but all of these beautiful, smooth, granitic boulders that we had to work with, and we just put them together in the right configuration to create that sight and sound. And again, this one is visible maybe 100 feet or so away from a deck, so we needed that whitewater effect in order to create the desired look as well as sound for this feature. This is my old personal pond, different type of rock. This is called an aqua blue, so very sharp edges, but you can put them together in different configurations to create just a beautiful mixture of different types of waterfalls. Can't talk about waterfalls without talking about Shaquille O'Neal. Obviously, anytime you can say that you've been building for him, you know, it's definitely a pretty amazing experience. This was a fun project. This was the first of 2 different projects that we did for him, just playing around with different configurations. And the reason I'm showing you these is so you can see the differences, the widths, the heights of different things. One of the things that stands out to me in this particular picture, we have this nice little slope to work with, fairly gentle, kind of coming down. The waterfalls, we wanted to have a series of little plunge pools coming down. When I'm designing and building, one of my favorite styles is actually, I like working with rectangles. So I like to have these nice wide falls that are really not that tall. And in certain situations, you could take that same rectangle and you could stand it up on the end and you could have a tall waterfall that's really narrow. What you want to try to be careful of is just doing a big box or a big block of something. It almost looks fake. I don't know how to explain it, but you want to try to play around. And everybody, if you're designing and building, even if you're just an admirer of different types of waterfalls, just that power of observation, looking at things and understanding what looks good to you. Everybody's got something different in their head of what they feel is beautiful. And what I try to do is take things that I personally like and put them into my designs. You may choose something completely different. That's the beauty of art. This is truly an artistic expression. So we're not just using art, but we're using all the different sciences, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, putting all these different disciplines together into one place where we could actually create these incredible works of art. Beautiful project down in South America. One of my favorites. So I finished this up in 2016. I can't believe this is 9 years old already at this point, but just a beautiful cascade. This is 18 feet tall, from here all the way up to the top. So that is, what is that, about 5 meters-ish or so. Beautiful fall. This is coming in at about 8 foot wide. The reason I'm saying these numbers is you have to understand that flow rate that I was talking about. 1,000 gallons to 1,500 gallons per hour per foot. It's actually perfect for this type of waterfall. Again, this is commercial, so I'm going to be up at around 3,000 gallons per hour per foot. Now this is 8 foot wide, so you could easily put those numbers together. And in fact, we're actually going much higher of a water flow on this particular feature because we wanted more of that whitewater effect. So the numbers that I'm giving you are not like hard and fast. They're guidelines. It's a starting point. So if you're getting into this business, if you're building one for yourself, if you're building it for a customer, or again, if you're just a lover of nature and want to better understand these things, it's a starting point. It's a marker that you can go with, and then you could play around up or down with whatever you feel looks good according to you as well as your customers.
A couple simple things that I always take into consideration. Number one is flow rate. In this application, we have this gentle trickling type of an effect which mimics actual springs and mountain fissures that you're going to find going through mountain passes. Just gentle trickling action of water. The other thing I want to think about is always the scale of the rock. I want to go with as large as rock as possible given the budget that I have to work with, because larger monolithic pieces are going to sell the story that this has been here forever.
So I talked a little bit about the different style of waterfalls, commercial, those sheet falls, those boulder style falls. I talked about the flow rates that we need, but now we have to put that actually into work to figure out the right pump. Pumps are critical because obviously that's what's giving us the flow. We're actually having a mechanical pump. We're going to pump the water up using pump and piping, etc., to create the desired flow. But you have to understand how to read the pump curve. Unfortunately, all too often, people are going to say, I have a 10,000 GPH pump, so I have 10,000 gallons of water per hour to work with. It's definitely not the case. When somebody says a 10,000 GPH pump, you should be expecting 6,000 to 7,000, 7,500 gallons per hour out of that pump. And that's because there's a curve, and that's what I want to show you right here. So this is a range. So this pump right here, 12 PN pump. Over here you have the height of the water that you can pump to from 0 all the way up to 55 feet. Now that particular pump, it's saying right here at this line, to understand these, at 22.5 feet, that pump is going to produce 0 gallons per hour. And that's because the weight of the water itself inside of that piping system, that pump is not designed to push the water that high. It's the design of the pump. You're physically not going to be able to do it. You've reached the maximum limit of it. So what you are going to try to do, and again, you're not going to operate it way down here, because as soon as you put water inside of a pressurized system, you have resistance. The walls of the actual piping are going to create a drag as the water tries to shoot through that piping system. It slows the water down. When the water hits an elbow, it's going to slow the water down. When the water hits another elbow or a curve or a T or anything, it's going to put back pressure on it. It's known as total dynamic head. So you have to understand the distance that you're pumping the water, the height that you're pumping the water, as well as the size of the pipe, the diameter of the pipe, because all three of these different things, and the number of elbows, etc., all of those are going to cumulatively are going to create total dynamic head. Once you understand that number, then you could actually size the waterfall accordingly. Now what I want to show you here, this says best operating zone. So this dark green, that's the best operating zone. You never want to operate to the ends of that, to the inside or outside of that, because that means you're going to put excess stress on the pump and it's just going to shorten the life. Can you do it? Of course you can, but you're going to be pissed off because the pump is going to fail probably prematurely. And it's just because of all those factors that I just described. So you want to understand that best operating point, and it's typically kind of right in the middle. So here we have an 8 PN pump. Maximum flow over here is going to be 5,500 GPH, but actually from a design standpoint, it says 4,800 down to about 2,500 is going to be your range. And then you can take that all the way up to here, and you could understand the total dynamic head. I know it's a lot of stuff. I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm just trying to make it real so you could understand exactly what you're getting into. And this is really, really important, because if you're designing and building like I am, I need to know exactly, within a few percent, obviously, not exact, but I need to understand if I am creating a waterfall that's 30 inches wide, And if it's going to be 10 feet tall, I need to know if that pump is going to be able to produce that same amount of water that I actually need to create the desired effect. Bigger the project gets, the more critical all of these numbers actually become. Now, a lot of the smaller ones and things, they're very, very flexible. You have a lot of flexibility in how you're designing and building, so it's not as critical. But as you start to blow things out, it becomes more and more important. And that's where I said science, technology, engineering, art, and math. You have to understand, unfortunately, you have to understand pump curves. You have to understand the mechanical nature of those pumps, how they operate. You have to understand the ratio of the different size pipes and how all these different things are going to change your flow rate. I mentioned briefly about pipe. People throw around sizes of different stuff all the time, 2-inch pipe, 3-inch, 4-inch, etc. I actually had somebody question me one time because I said I needed 4-inch pipe. And the customer said, well, I don't have 4-inch, but I have 2 inches. That math does not work. Yes, 2 plus 2 equals 4, but when you're talking about the diameter, the square area, the volume of water that's actually held in a 1-foot section, completely different. Let me explain. So here's a 2-inch diameter pipe. It's got 3.14 square inches of cross section, just that cross-sectional area. And if you had a 1-foot section of that pipe, it will hold 0.16 gallons of water. Now let's just jump up to that 4-inch pipe. He said, just do 2 inches. That would be the same as the 4-inch. I'm like, oh, not quite. Cross-sectional area is actually 12.5 inches. It's actually 4 times that, 0.65 gallons in a foot versus 0.16. This is 4 times the volume of water inside of it. As you can see, it just keeps scaling itself up. And you get up to these massive pipes over here, 12-inch. Just in a 1-foot section, it's 6 gallons of water. You've picked up a 5-gallon pail of water. You know how heavy that is. So when you're thinking and designing and building, odds are slim that any of you are going to work with a 12-inch diameter pipe, but you have to understand the weight of the piping system. You could have thousands and tons of water just in transit inside of that piping system as it scales itself up. So it's just something to think about. Now here's where it gets a little bit more fun. We start taking all this different stuff that we've learned and we start to put it together in different configurations. This was one of the projects that my customer in Southern Africa actually saw and fell in love with. This is John Goodwin, beautiful project, Crown Point, Indiana. Great friends with John, known him now since 2008. I finished this project back in 2009, and here we are actually designing and building it, and you can see we're working with sedimentary rock. This is all limestone. We're coming in here with these flat ledges of rock. So I'm setting these spillway stones, and then on the sides of it, we're gonna come in with what we call our framing rocks, which are going to frame out the water. It's going to force the water to go exactly where I want it. Here it is actually operational. This is a massive, massive waterfall. This is well over 10 feet, 10 to 12 foot wide, and I have over 100,000 gallons of water per hour, and this is residential. The look, the feel is just unbelievable, and the scale of it. Again, these pictures do not do it justice. I mean, you see in this other picture, this is a massive excavator over here. So that's a huge, huge excavator, and that excavator was just sitting right over in this section. These numbers become more and more critical. These next pictures I'm going to show you the project in Africa. I would not have been able to build it to the level of detail that I recently built it 10 years ago. I had to kind of grow and understand and utilize all these different things and all these past projects to actually be able to pull off a project of this magnitude. This massive area right here in between me, this is going to be the wetland filtration system, 30 or 40 by 50. It's a giant wetland filter. This is going to be the waterfall. Is going to be set at basically this elevation. My cross member is kind of collapsed. It's been there for a few months now, but that's going to be one of the waterfalls coming out of the wetland. You can also see these little cross system up here. That's going to be for a plunge pool in between the cave and the wetland filter. Try to create a couple of big jumping rocks to kind of hop down into a deep little plunge pool, just like you would find up in the mountains. I've done that many, many times. Man has been connected to water, obviously. We need water on a daily basis for drinking, but we also need it to grow our food. We need it for hygiene, etc. It's one of the most important resources on all of planet Earth. Creating a living ecosystem where life flourishes is one of my favorite things to do. So, and it all starts with the foundation. It starts with the underground reservoir, which mimics the aquifers that are beneath us. We're going to have wetland filtration that mimic the natural wetlands that are found along lakes, rivers, and streams around the world. We're going to have a series of cascades and waterfalls, which again are using biomimicry techniques. We're building them directly as we kind of watch them from nature. All of these different techniques are what's going to give us not only the look, the feel, but the function. This is one of my little hand sketches that I actually did for the customer. You can see we have some buildings over here, stairs going down over here, and this is kind of a covered area. This is kind of an entryway. This is a big turnaround right there where vehicles will come into play. So I designed in a bridge going across to a gazebo structure. That gazebo, to my knowledge, I don't think that has been built yet. Tried to weave everything in between. So the reason I had to do this was all of this stuff, these stairs, this building, all of that stuff was there. So I had this little joint here to work with. This is maybe 30 feet wide or so. Couldn't really twist and turn that much. So what I wanted to do was to play around with the rock configuration. And I think this is really, really important. When I'm designing something out, you can see I have these wide sweeps and everything. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people say, oh, you got this really cool cavity over here, this cove. Why don't we take a massive boulder and we'll stick it all inside of here? Well, if you do that, you get rid of the cove effect. So it's actually the exact opposite what I'm trying to do. So on these peninsulas, I come out with very large rocks. So it really accentuates those curves. And then in those coves, I try to go with really, really little rocks, so it actually opens up and it creates this wide sweeping pattern. So you have to be conscious of choosing the right rock, putting them in the right orientation. So what I'll do, I'll mark out my pond, and then I'll come in on top of my rubber membrane and my geotextile. I'll actually spray paint out where I want big rocks and how far they're going to come out into the stream bed. When I'm designing and building, I typically am going to over excavate all of this, and I build in sections. I don't dig out an entire stream bed. I'm going to do a section at a time, and I'm going to systematically work my way up. That's because I need access for heavy equipment to come in from the different sides so I can set the stones. I don't want to block myself off. So I'm always thinking about access and logistics and how you're going to get equipment and people and the excess dirt away and the new rocks in and the gravel and all of that stuff. So you have to understand kind of the flow of the project. And then when I'm digging, I'm over excavating everything. I put my rubber membrane in place, and then I mark out where I want those rocks, and then all I need to do is backfill everything up against the back of it.
This is the last large stream section that we have before we do the wetland. Right where the big Cat 352 is sitting, that's where our wetland filter is going to be located. This section of the stream is going to be cut across by that beautiful bridge. We have our concrete cloth folded back. We will then put all that stuff back in place once we're ready, but you can see a layer of sand coming down in the bottom. Very, very rocky, hard subsoil. So it's actually great from a foundational standpoint, but it can damage actually our rubber membrane. So coming on top of that with a layer of sand is very, very beneficial.
My excavation might come way out over here. And then I have a couple options. Once that excavation is done, I can take that rubber membrane and I can pull it behind the rock nice and tight, and then put soil on that backside, and then I just trim the rubber liner off. Or I could actually leave that pocket full of gravel, and I could put aquatic plantings in there if I want.
Getting ready to extend the stream to the further waterfall. We are coming in with our concrete cloth on top of our rubber membrane. The reason we're doing that is because of the abundance of animals in the area. I am anticipating that some of them are going to try to walk inside of this river system to access the water for drinking, and if they do that, a lot of the animals have hooves. They're big animals, so we want to make sure that we have enough padding where they cannot damage the membrane. So it's all about understanding the loads, putting the different layers together in order to create a waterproof system. So underneath this, we have 3 inches of sand, heavy duty fabric, rubber liner, concrete cloth on top of that, and then another layer of the heavy duty fabric. So we're really creating a solid system, which is also allowing us to set these monstrous boulders. I mean, just check this out. We have this incredible riverine type system that's cutting through there, just big giant boulders going through the entire area, which is looking incredible. Landscaping, as you have already seen, is critical for the success of any project. We have some beautiful, beautiful palms that are going to go in. This is going to frame everything out and really accentuate that valley type of a feel that we're trying to accomplish here. So you can see the elevation change that we've already created. We got all these big boulders in the foreground. We have a secondary layer with a waterfall cascade. We're building up outside perimeter to give it the illusion that all of that water has carved its way through this hillside, and all of these buildings have been built in and around this water feature. We're gonna put in above that a big cluster of of beautiful plantings. Working on the waterfall over here, we're starting to backfill behind these big boulders. This is going to be a boulder style waterfall, so lots of heavy, thick water coursing in between the large boulders. We have the Mini X over here digging out for one of the trees. Crane is setting big rocks, also bringing in sacks of gravel. We have the large 352 doing excavation, and then we have the earth movers to get rid of all excess soil. Skid steer is operational, bringing in our gravel.
Here's that actual project in Southern Africa. Here's that building. Here's those steps that I was talking about. There's a ramp over here. Here's the steps. This is a really large piece of equipment actually sitting there, so you can kind of see the scale. That's a backhoe loader. Not a giant one, but it's fairly good size. So that kind of gives you an idea of the scale of some of these rocks. This rock here is about 10 feet. 3 meters from one end to the other. It's a pretty good sized chunk of rock. This is actually pretty straight, but by putting those rocks strategically, I could create tons of actual movement. Once you add that flowing water, that also changes the visual look of it. The stream bed does not have to all be the exact same depth. So what I'll do is I'll dig out the stream bed, and then in certain areas on the bottom of the pond, I might have tiny little river pebbles, and then I might put a big boulder right in the midstream. It might not be a waterfall, but now all of a sudden, the water level's up here, I have a deep pool, the water has to well up and go over, so that increases velocity, that increases interest. If this rock gets close to the surface, it actually creates little rippling actions. And here's kind of that sweeping motion that I was talking about. Also the scale of the different rocks. This rock is going to look larger when I take it and I put another smaller rock next to it. It's going to give me some variation. So you need to have ratios of stone. Best way to learn this stuff, go out into nature. The ratio, the size ranges of different things I think is really, really important, and it's something that we often take for granted and we don't pay enough attention to. So a really well-designed feature is going to have a nice blend of massive boulders all the way down to hand-sized stuff and even river stone. Again, I shouldn't say massive. You can build a spectacular water feature all out of hand-sized rock, but you need to have the right variation. So you need to have a ratio that you're gonna work with. So all big doesn't work, all little doesn't work. I like to have a blend of large, medium, small, extra large, you name it. We got some massive round boulders. We have some of these long flat guys. We have a standing rock over here, another little low flat one down low. We have different size of cobblestones down here going all the way down to tiny little river rocks. So that variation I think is really, really important. This is what that stream bed actually looks like now that it's completed. Absolutely spectacular. You could see that variation. Actually, you could barely see. There's some waterfalls way over here, so you could hardly see them. This rock, this one right here that I've been talking about, that thing's about 3.5 feet tall. I mean, it's massive. This is a deep stream. These pictures are really hard to do justice to everything.
There is nothing, and I mean nothing, like a beautiful stream system. Look at this deep water pool. This is almost 3 feet deep. Giant cobblestones and massive rocks. The scale of this does not do it justice. Gigantic boulders working their way all the way up. The rubber membrane that we used for this was actually 30 feet wide. And that was because we wanted large slides of rock cutting themselves across to get that twisting and turning motion. I love mimicking nature, and there's nothing better than mimicking a stream system. You can see this fast moving water coming up, welling up in between those two large boulders, as well as some of the cobblestones. That fast moving water, we have little back eddies of water circulating through. It hits this giant stone. You can see that water twisting and turning. If you're a fisherman, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is the type of stuff that we all look for and crave. And on a hot summer day, this is the perfect recreational opportunities. And this stream system just continues to weave its way higher and higher, all the way to the top of that mountain that we actually created.
You can also see the careful utilization of plantings. Unfortunately, the crepe myrtle over here lost all of its leaves after time of year. Got these beautiful palms over here just to kind of shelter some of the buildings and things, and more palms over in the background, and then working all the way down to all the different perennials as well as aquatic vegetation. I'm a rock guy, but I also love to soften it. We want to come in with the right plant material, aquatics as well as terrestrials and washes of river rock, etc., to create those desired effects. I think that's really important in order to create it.
Oh, check this out. One of my favorites here on the property is the Moringa tree. These are coming directly out of the mountainsides, and this is the perfect location because we're creating these rocky ridges, which is the exact habitat where these incredible trees are found in the surrounding mountainside. So we're trying to blend a mixture of native plants as well as decorative to create the desired effects.
Here we are again working on another section of that stream. This is that same project here in Africa, just setting in some of these frames. And right now you might look at this and say, gosh, what the heck are you trying to do over here? You can see the scale of these. This is that deep stream section. This is mid-chest on these guys. I mean, this is a deep giant waterfall. So instead of having a waterfall here, we actually just put another boulder in between and we created just some fast moving rapids going through. Here you could actually see those rocks going in places. We're moving ourselves along, and I thought this was a really good illustration of over digging everything, and I'll show you this finished picture. So this is actually a waterfall stone right there. So here we are moving along some of these big flat slabs. I'm always looking at viewing lanes. Where is the waterfall going to be visible? And I don't need to see every waterfall from every single angle. It's almost impossible, but I want to make sure that I have certain key viewing areas that are visible for the client. Always kind of stepping back and looking. Like if you're working right on top of a waterfall, working face to face with the rock, you need to go 50 feet or 100 feet away, step back and look at the bigger picture, because you have to understand how all the different rocks are going to integrate and work together. So setting a series of layers. So from this vantage point, once this is full of water, I'm not going to see that entire waterfall. Some of that's going to disappear behind these big rocks, and that water is going to come into motion and become visible, and it becomes alive. And here actually is that waterfall operational. You can see the bridge has been installed. This is where that gazebo is yet to be built, is going over in here. This is that little split waterfall, those rapids. The water going through that is probably 6 inches thick. So it's just really thick, heavy water as it courses its way through. Once we add fish, which we still haven't done yet, unfortunately, went into winter right when we wrap stuff up. But once we start adding fish in here, it's going to take this project actually to the next level, because the fish I have picked out, there's going to be different species of fish in all these different pools and pockets and things like that to really make this come to life. Waterfall that I mentioned right there, disappearing behind that big boulder. And then you can see the importance of all the different layers of vegetation and big giant boulders and trying to hide things. So I want to see these beautiful boulders, and then I'm going to try to hide them with vegetation and come in with more accent rocks. So we're always kind of thinking of how we're going to work our way in and around all of this stuff, and little standing areas over here. So it's just one of the most dynamic forms of architecture and landscaping that I could think of. A lot of very large rounded rock to work with on this project. Not a lot of fractured stuff. We did have some fractured pieces, but not a lot. Not a lot of flat, like pancakey style, but there were some. What I try to do is identify certain rocks and understand where they're going to be utilized.
All right, coming in with big trees with one crane, big rocks with the other. That rock looks tiny just because of the vantage point, but that actually is I gotta find out, 30-ish ton, 30, 35 ton rock.
So you kind of have to have a mental catalog in the back of your head of where specific rocks are going to be used on the actual project. So again, you can see just these rounded shapes, etc. And then you got this guy, which I think is really important. That one is kind of sloping away. So you can see kind of the lines that we're trying to work with here. So waterfalls and streams are typically down in valleys. So what I tried to do was build up, and I built up a lot on the sides, not only with dirt and with rocks, but with vegetation to really create this valley. So you have all this vegetation, rockwork, and soil, and then down at the bottom of that valley you have that waterfall. So just trying to accentuate all of that stuff. But I have to go back down to a specific grade. Now I said I had rounded rocks to work with. So this rock over here on this outside edge, it was actually a quite large rock. It was almost something like this. So by flipping it over, I could kind of create that shape, and instead of putting it in like this, you dig down into the subsoil. So I'm digging down to create a line, so only a certain section is going to be visible. So I could actually play around, I could manipulate that, going back and forth. And I think that's one of those things that's difficult to teach. You have to understand where you could dig and where you can't dig. You have to be able to work on top of the rubber membrane. Where I have soil, I could actually dig down, I could play around with those different things. So I'm working with the materials that I have. I'm understanding the medium, designing backwards and figuring out the pumps. And I know this sounds super complicated, all this stuff. And unless you've been doing it a long time, it's difficult to understand all the pieces. So I'm explaining this properly. What I think is really, really cool, I mean, check this out. This is the cenote, which has not been built. You can see the concrete way over there in the background. So that is going to be just awesome, and I actually have a finished picture of that as we work our way across. Here's that same waterfall now that's operational. That concrete structure is buried underneath that. You can see that beautiful waterfall, highly visible. So this is that turnaround area where that parking area was. So this is visible. That waterfall is highly visible, and you're working your way all the way up looking at those levels. Huge mature trees over here. I mean, these beautiful date palms, just absolutely incredible. And then we have the Moringa trees over in here. Just so much fun to create all these different waterfall effects. And when it all comes together, I mean, it's just magical. And we have a little bridge down there in the foreground or in the midground where cars are actually going to be driving across. Now this kind of tricks you, because from where this picture's taken all the way to this upper waterfall, it's like almost a football field. That's like 300 feet. That's 90 meters away. I mean, that's a long distance away. So it tricks you. And here again is that over excavating because of the massive boulders, as well as really poor subsoil. We came in with a layer of sand on top of everything. Then we put in our geotextile, our rubber membrane, layer of concrete cloth, and then another layer of geotextile. I'm going to point out a couple things in this drawing. I said I marked stuff out on the ground. This is actually going to be the bridge, the edge of the bridge. It's actually going to be much higher than that. The bridge is going to kind of come through this area up here. It's going to be an arched bridge. We have our concrete structure, much more visible. There's a huge dome that actually goes on top of that. We brought in 30 feet of soil. I think it was 1,700 truckloads of soil that came in on this project. 1,700 truckloads to build up this massive mound of soil. I mean, this is giant, just massive. It goes out in all different directions. It's over 1.5 acres in space, so it's just gigantic. What I wanted to point out, while I have my rock selection here, I kind of talked about some of the different rocks that we had to work with. Every once in a while you'll find flatter ones. Sometimes they have broken edges on them. So this one I thought was kind of interesting because it's got this little dipped out area. The other thing that I'm looking for is this is pretty vertical like that. But if I were just to tilt that slightly forward, the back does not come higher than this. So I think that's important. So right now, if it goes straight like this is slightly higher than that. Seems simple, it really does. But when you tilt this forward, this is kind of going to be level. But now this is at a slight angle. So that's going to allow the water to whoosh, fall off of that, which is kind of what we did in this application. The other nice thing about going with a thin rock like this, you don't have a lot of waste or a lot of volume you're taking up. You could also play around with the gravel bed behind it. So you can see this bottom rock. I have another rock. So we'll say this is the bottom rock. I fill this pocket behind this rock. So say the waterfall is going to go that way. I got a pocket over here. I'm going to fill this with gravel, crushed rock. Now I can take this rock and I could set it down in that gravel bed, and I could increase or decrease that to create the desired effect. And it doesn't have to be right on it. It could actually be back a bit. So now this water is going to fall into a little pocket behind it. So working with the right rocks and looking for the desired effect, I think, is really important. The other thing that I'm going to do is I could take my rocks like that, and I could kind of come in, and this becomes my frame rock. And you could actually have this kind of tilted, so water's going to hit this and kind of come off, playing around with different little models and tools. But I thought it was highly visual. I always have rocks laying around my office, right? Everybody should. So I come in with different configurations to create all those different effects. And I think it's just a lot of fun to play around understanding these different waterfall effects. And what I just showed you on a tiny scale on my hand is exactly, and I mean exactly, what we have here. So this is a broken piece of rock. It's tucked in behind this other rock. I have a bed of gravel behind this boulder. Now once I turn that on, and if I've done my numbers right, if I figured out the right pipe size and I put the right water flow going all over this, it's going to be unreal. I mean, I've been here, I've looked at this project, and I'm just blown away by the outcome, because everything kind of worked itself together, creating these effects. And this is a massive mound, I mean, just gigantic mound of soil. This waterfall is 12 feet tall back over here. I have a series of cascades coming in all these different directions coming through. It's just crazy the amount of work that was put in just this one small section. Thousands of tons of rock. Thousands of tons of rock are used in this waterfall composition just for the upper section. I hope I kept you engaged for that entire time. I apologize for going as long as I did, but it was something I believe that had actually happen. So again, I appreciate all of you. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you all on the next vlog, and hopefully, fingers crossed, I'm going to be doing a walkthrough of this amazing project so you could actually see it come to life with actual video. Stay tuned.